The mistake was already made. They just didn't know it yet. And with a single, routine flip of a switch 200,000 miles from Earth, that hidden error was about to detonate a bomb. In an instant, a lunar landing mission became a fight for survival. As their ship hemorrhaged oxygen into the void, 3 astronauts shared a single, terrifying thought. They were going to die because of a flaw buried deep within their machine, one that had waited for the most remote point in human history to reveal itself. Their goal was instantly forgotten, replaced by a desperate, impossible new mission: survive. Using a spacecraft that was never designed to save them, following instructions written on scraps of paper, and trusting a team on Earth to calculate their every move. This is the story of how 3 men, on the brink of being lost forever, fought their way home. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. During the early 1960s, as the Soviets led the space race by launching a dog and then cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin into orbit, U.S. President John F. Kennedy issued a bold challenge. America would land a man on the moon before the decade ended. This vision was realized on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface during the Apollo 11 mission. Prior to this, Apollo missions 7 through 10 had reached the moon, though none involved a landing. Apollo 13 was intended to land astronauts in the flaw region, a geologically complex area believed to have been formed by an asteroid impact. The spacecraft was composed of 3 sections: the cone-shaped command module, housing the crew for most of the journey; the spider-like lunar module, designed to carry 2 astronauts to the moon's surface; and the service module, a large cylinder containing the main engines and oxygen tanks. This service module would remain in orbit, later rejoining the capsule after the moonwalk. This intricate maneuver required perfect timing, managed by 2 onboard guidance computers. The 3-man crew was led by Mission Commander James Lovell, a highly experienced astronaut and father of 4. He was joined by Command Module Pilot John Swigert, a last-minute replacement, and Lunar Module Pilot Fred Hayes, a rookie who left his wife and 3 children behind. Despite the mission's ambition, public interest was low when Apollo 13 launched on April 11, 1970. After all, moonwalks now seemed almost routine. A live broadcast from the spacecraft wasn't even carried by major networks. No one could have known that just minutes after that broadcast ended, an event would occur that would captivate the entire world. For the moment, however, everything was proceeding smoothly. The crew, traveling at 40,000 kilometers per hour, had successfully docked the lunar module and were on their way to the moon. At 46 hours and 43 minutes, capsule communicator Joe Kerwin even remarked, "We're bored to tears down here." But a hidden danger lurked just meters below the crew, cracked wires beside a highly flammable oxygen tank. The calm was about to break. Now, 322,000 kilometers from Earth and nearing the moon, Jack Swigert activated fans to stir the oxygen tanks. This routine action exposed the damaged wiring, causing Tank 2 to explode with a loud bang. The crew initially thought it was another of Fred Hayes' pranks, but they quickly realized the situation was gravely real. A master alarm flashed as Commander James Lovell delivered the now famous report, "Houston, we have a problem." On Earth, mission controllers were stunned by the data, which showed the loss of 2 fuel cells, the spacecraft's main electrical power source. One oxygen tank was empty, the second was rapidly depressurizing. Engineers scrambled, struggling to believe so many systems could fail at once without being catastrophic. Their fears were confirmed minutes later when Lovell looked out the window and saw gas venting into space. Their last oxygen supply was leaking away. The crew understood the immense danger, but refused to panic, knowing it would solve nothing. With their oxygen, electricity, light, and water failing, a moon landing was impossible. Their new priority was survival. They first had to correct their trajectory. The explosion had knocked them off course, threatening to send them hurtling past Earth into endless space. As the crisis deepened, news networks across the world began broadcasting the story. The world watched, including the astronauts' families. With the service module's propulsion destroyed, engineers on the ground directed the crew to use the lunar module as a lifeboat. This presented immense challenges. How would they maintain oxygen, conserve power, stretch their limited food and water, navigate home? To save energy, all non-critical systems in the command module were shut down, causing the temperature to plummet below freezing. The crew worried the guidance computers, their essential eyes and hands for steering, would fail in the cold.
The guidance system is like your eyes and your foot on the throttle and your hands on the steering wheel. It's the information that gives you the ability to, if you will, steer from one point to another. And so the question was, would the instrument be able to take the cold temperature?
With just 15 minutes of power left, they moved into the lunar module. A single bright spot was its surplus oxygen, but that wouldn't last long. The module, nicknamed SLAM, was a flimsy craft with paper-thin aluminum walls, no thicker than 3 layers of foil. A careless move could puncture the hull, venting their air and dooming them all. On Earth, frantic engineers calculated the module could support 3 men for 2 days, not the 2 it was designed for. But the journey home would take longer. The central question remained: how to return them safely. They had 2 choices: fire the main engine for a faster return but risk total failure, or a longer, colder, and more uncertain path around the moon. They chose the longer route, using the moon's gravity to slingshot them back to Earth. This required firing the lunar module's rocket, a maneuver for which it was never designed, especially with the command module still attached. The altered center of gravity made the craft wildly unstable. Control inputs produced unexpected motions, turning flying into a constant struggle. An initial 35-second burn was executed, but ground calculations showed it wouldn't be enough. They'd run out of power and water before reaching home. They needed more speed. However, the primitive onboard computer, with less power than a basic modern calculator, couldn't handle the complex calculations. All navigation data had to be computed on Earth and radioed up, with the crew copying it meticulously before losing signal behind the moon. A 5-minute burn was calculated to shorten the return by 24 hours, but power consumption remained a critical problem. The biggest drain was the guidance system. Heated debates broke out among controllers about whether to shut it down. Eventually, they decided to keep it on for crucial maneuvers, then power down almost everything and endure a freezing 3-day coast home. To conserve resources, water rations were slashed to 1/5 of normal. The crew was also told not to eject urine to avoid altering their trajectory, forcing them to store waste and further limit drinking. Dehydration, extreme cold, and sleep deprivation set in. Fred Hayes developed a bladder infection and fever, with his crewmates huddling around him to provide warmth. Miserable and exhausted, they floated on as the entire world followed their desperate journey home. The world held its breath. A global audience, united in anxiety, offered prayers and moments of silence for the 3 men hurtling through space. Nations stood by, ready to assist. What had begun as a mission was now a perilous adventure unlike any other. Yet another critical problem emerged. The crew was slowly being poisoned by their own exhaled carbon dioxide. The lunar module's round scrubber filters were nearly exhausted, while the command module held an abundance of square ones. The 2 systems were utterly incompatible. The solution had to be devised on the ground and read up to the crew, who then had to build it from the only materials they had on hand. Using cardboard from procedure manuals, plastic bags, and duct tape, they ingeniously fashioned an adapter, connecting the square canister to the round hole and saving themselves from suffocation. Even after overcoming the crises of power, water, food, and air, the final and most dangerous hurdle remained: re-entry. To survive, they had to hit a precise 2-degree corridor in Earth's atmosphere. Too shallow, and they would skip off into space forever. Too steep, and they would incinerate in a fiery flash. With the guidance computer powered down to conserve energy, the crew had to perform a manual course correction. They aligned the Earth in their window, a fragile visual target. One astronaut handled the left-right motion, another the up-down, while the third manned the buttons to fire the engine, a direct, untested connection used for the first and only time in Apollo history. At the precise moment, the command was given, "Start." The engine ignited, a brief and terrifying burn, their last chance to steer for home. The entire world waited, watching the sky. The engine ignited. For 14 seconds, they fought to keep the Earth centered in their window, manually juggling the spacecraft's attitude against all odds. Then silence. They could only wait. The final immense challenge was to revive the frozen, powerless command module for re-entry. Engineers on the ground, led by Flight Director Gene Kranz, had performed a miracle, compressing months of procedure writing into 3 days. Every calculation was critical. The crew, shivering in the cold, transcribed the complex startup instructions onto any scrap of paper they could find. It was a desperate gamble. Systems were so cold that controllers feared the batteries and fuel lines had frozen, which would make the module impossible to power up. To their immense relief, as switches were thrown, the module shuddered to life. The components had survived the deep cold. As the damaged service module was jettisoned, the crew saw the catastrophic damage for the first time, an entire panel blown away. This raised a new, horrifying possibility. The heat shield might be compromised. If it was, they would burn up in the atmosphere. There was no time to dwell. They said farewell to their lifeboat, the lunar module, and oriented themselves for re-entry. The capsule began its fiery descent into the atmosphere, initiating a planned 3-minute communications blackout. When the blackout persisted beyond the expected time, the anxiety on Earth became unbearable. The silence stretched on, and a terrible dread set in. It appeared the crew had been lost at the final moment. Then suddenly, a crackle broke the silence. "Okay, Joe." The blackout was over. The crew had successfully navigated the atmosphere. With immense relief, Mission Control watched as the parachutes deployed, slowing the capsule for a safe splashdown in the Pacific Ocean on April 17th. Their perilous journey of nearly 143 hours was over. All 3 astronauts were safe. A world that had watched and prayed together could finally exhale. A miracle of ingenuity and courage was complete. They were home. Against impossible odds, through ingenuity and sheer force of will, they had made it. But the question remains, the one that haunts every engineer and historian who has studied this mission. Was it just a 1 in a million failure? A tragic flaw in a single component? Or was the 200,000-mile mistake something more? A subtle error in design? A procedure that wasn't quite right? A warning sign that was missed? What do you think? Could it happen again? And what other hidden stories are waiting to be uncovered in the silent, empty space between our world and the moon?